Hello, I am back today to talk to you about the process of egg freezing in and of itself. As you can see, it's less cold today in London. I'm taking advantage of the short amount of days a year that we have sun. But yes, so today I will be starting the video telling you what I've had to do in the last couple of months leading up to my second cycle of egg freezing and what everyone should do before they start the process. And then I'll explain to you in detail sort of the day by day of what is entailed within the process to the point of egg collection, which is the surgery that you have at the end where they'll collect your eggs. And then at the end, I will also be answering some questions. Actually, I got a lot of questions yesterday by so many women that either are going through the process or planning to, and women that are thinking about it. So very important questions, actually. So towards the end, I'll mark in the comments below when there's, if you just want to skip to the questions, at what point in the video you can do that. And yeah, so basically that is it. So here we go. Okay, so once you decide that you want to freeze your eggs, obviously you book an appointment with your doctor. I was referred to my fertility specialist by my local gynecologist here, and he's been nothing but amazing. He actually even gave me his cell phone number in case I have any questions. I can literally just text him. So I've realized, I mean, maybe I'm lucky, but through this entire process, the doctors have been nothing but supportive. I think they understand how difficult it is for women to go through this, and so they've been nothing but amazing. But anyway, so they will ask you to do a bunch of blood tests that is required, I think, at least, a couple of days before you go in for your first scan, which I'll explain when in the process that will be important. So I believe the blood test they did was for HIV, any STDs like chlamydia and all of that, all the common sort of reproductive diseases. So they check for that, which is important, obviously, before going to the egg freezing. So you'll have to do that blood test. I did mine a year ago, so I don't need to do it again. They haven't asked for it this time around. So I think it's valid for, up to 2 years. So I think you only have to really do it once. And then you book that blood test, you go through that blood test, then they'll tell you to call them and let them know when you're due for your period. So this is very, very important because your menstrual cycle will guide, obviously, the start date of the egg freezing process. So for example, in my situation, I have a calendar. Every woman is different, but I'm extremely regular in my period. So either give or take 1 day before or 1 day after to 2, it's guaranteed I'm gonna have my period. I know that other women are not as regular. So this is an important thing to know. If you're a woman who is not regular in their periods, you might be asked to go on birth control for a couple of months before the egg freezing process to regulate the cycle. Because this process is it involves such important timing, it is important that, your cycle is regular. Otherwise the process might be thrown off and everything. So you might be put on birth control. I have not been on birth control for, I think, over 8 years. Sorry, Mom. And just because I don't feel good in it. And I am lucky enough that I have regular cycles. So I was never asked to go on birth control. So don't be alarmed if you are someone who doesn't have regular cycles and doesn't really know if this can harm the process. Don't worry, the doctor will be able to give you the necessary measures to be able to make your period regular. So I called them and told them, okay, my calendar says February 10th is when I'm due on my period. So they scheduled me in for my first nurse consultancy, my first nurse appointment yesterday. So yesterday morning, went to the clinic, one, for them to show me the new medication that I'll be on. So this appointment is very important because the nurse will literally explain to you everything. She'll say to you, what is the medication that your doctor has assigned you? She'll teach you how to inject actually yourself the needles and make you practice. Obviously, they have this little cushion and she just makes you practice. Of course, a year ago, I was literally hyperventilating when she was doing this because I couldn't even look at the needle. But they're super, super lovely and very understanding, as I said. So this is also the very important appointment where you can ask all the questions that you have in your mind about timings and everything. So because I was starting new medication, obviously I had more questions. I said, considering it's a different medication and it's stronger, is there more likelihood that I'm gonna have different symptoms or more symptoms and whatnot? They told me they don't believe so, but of course any person can react differently to any medication. So we shall see. And then that's it really. I mean, obviously a year ago I had a lot more questions. I asked whether I could work out, and that is actually one of the questions I received in my DMs yesterday after posting the video, so I'll answer all these questions after. But anyway, so you go into this appointment, she shows you everything, and then schedules you in for your next scan based on your period due date. So I told her I'm due on my period, and this is where timing is very important. So told her I'm due on Friday the 10th of February. So she said if I wake up the 10th in the morning and that I'm already bleeding, that's considered day 1 of my period. If I wake up on the 10th, still no bleeding, but towards the afternoon, nighttime, that's when I bleed on the 10th, it's actually considered day 1, the 11th of February, the day after. They tell you that you need to start the injections on the 2nd day of your period. So I'll see whenever I get it, and I'll make a video so you'll understand. So technically day 2 is when you start the injections. They'll schedule you in for a scan 2 to 3 days after your first injection. So technically they told me if I'm due when I'm due, which is the 10th, and essentially Saturday is my day 2, then Monday I would be going in for an ultrasound scan. So the only, well, not the only, because a lot of things are annoying about this process, but what is intense about this process, and also for women that work while they have to do this and haven't, still have to continue their life, is you will be scheduled regularly to go to the hospital and do these scans. I remember last year I probably went every 2 to 3 days, and it's not uncomfortable. It's a vaginal ultrasound, but it doesn't hurt or anything like that. They just check how your ovaries are developing with the medication day by day. So very important, these ultrasounds. So they will happen depending on what your nurse and your doctor say every 2 to 3 days. So that is essentially where I'm at now. I had my meeting yesterday. She taught me how to inject myself with this new medication. This next part of the video is me actually showing you the medication that I'm on, what it looks like, what it involves, and then basically finish off with literally the point of where I am now, and then I will go into what the rest of the process is. I promise I won't be too long. I know these videos tend to be long, but there's just obviously so much information, so you can skip if you're bored. So yeah, basically that's the plan. So right now I'm going to show you the medication that I'm on and how it works basically, and what it is and what it does to your body. Okay, so this is how the medication looks like. I have 6 boxes in here, which is the equivalent of 12 doses, because it takes around, on average, 12 days, this whole process. This is different than the one I was in last year. It's the last year I was on Menopure. This is gonal F, and basically, to put it in simple terms, this medication is the first one you start with. Then, depending on what your ovaries look like throughout your appointments with the ultrasound, they will instruct you to start taking this one. So Pyramidel is mine. I'm sure there's different kinds, but essentially they all do the same thing. So this one there will be essentially a point where you'll be taking, unfortunately, 2 injections in your stomach, but it doesn't last very long, promise. So anyway, what this one specifically does, and it's the one you start with, is that it makes your ovaries produce the majority amount of eggs. As I explained in the video before, and as you know, the reproductive menstrual cycle works, every woman releases 1 egg per menstrual cycle. This actually is the hormones that will make your ovaries produce as many eggs as it can. So this is what makes you bloated and emotional and just PMSy and all of it. So they say that the side effects of this are headaches, nausea, bloating, weight gain, mood swings, to say the least. It's essentially the same medicine as I was last time, but the doctor just wants to, it's a different name, but the doctor just wants to see if my body maybe reacts to this one better. I would say that the one I took last year, apart from mild headaches, not even every day, the only thing I really struggled from was bloating, but that's obviously normal because your ovaries are obviously, imagine, you're already bloated when you're on your period, but imagine I had 12 follicles and eggs, so it's a lot. At one point I feel like I looked like I was 6 months pregnant. But apart from that, I didn't experience nausea, didn't experience weight gain at all. So yeah, who knows with this one. We'll all be in this together, so you'll see how I'll react. Then Pyramidel, the one you take when they tell you to after your scans. The only annoying thing about this is like you don't really know how long your process will be or how short, because it really depends on how your ovary is reacting to the medication. It might be that it's really not doing well, so they might even bump up the dosage halfway through. It's all a day-by-day thing, so don't stress out. I really stressed out last year over every single day. Every time I'd go to the appointment and they do an ultrasound and it wasn't what I was expecting to see, I'd get so down and upset and couldn't sleep and put a lot of pressure on myself. And I genuinely think that the mind and the body is connected. So take it day by day. 2 days after that, I went to the ultrasound and I had 4 new follicles. So trust the process, basically. This one actually, what it does is it prevents your body from getting rid of those eggs. So essentially prevents you from ovulating. That way that they basically stay put before until egg collection, basically. So obviously your body naturally, different women have different ovulation days. So the normal cycle, let's say, is 28 days. A woman ovulates at the 14th day. Other women have shorter cycles, which means they ovulate before, or longer cycles, which means they ovulate later. So essentially this injection is to control that, so that they're able to also schedule you in for the egg collection, and the eggs haven't just suddenly disappeared and they're there and they're like, where have they gone? And then this one, it's very exciting when you reach to the last injection. So they will tell you again, after all these ultrasounds, when your eggs are mature enough. Every time they tell me that, I literally feel like a chicken. It's like my mature eggs. Your eggs are mature enough to be collected. So obviously the first eggs that are, well, not obviously, because I actually didn't know this. Anyway, this one, let me just rewind. This one it's called the trigger shot. And this medication is given to you a specific number of hours before they schedule you in for the actual egg retrieval. And this is what it actually prepares the ovaries for that collection, sort of to release the eggs at a specific time for when they collect them. It's all very confusing, as I've had to really repeat myself with these things 1,000 times because it's a lot. But so yeah, where was I? One thing, I lost my train of thought, I had to pause. So one thing that is important that I didn't know, as I was mentioning before, I didn't know about my body, about eggs and how the whole process is. So when you go to these ultrasounds, you'll be producing, some eggs will be produced first, then others will start to grow as you do the injections, which means that some eggs will be maturing faster than others. So for example, as I mentioned, I had 12. So you may be asking, how did I only freeze 4 if I had 12? So of course I was hopeful when they told me 12 and disappointed when I found out only 4 were frozen. But then I understood that by the time that it was egg collection, so your eggs, when you go to the ultrasounds, I will take you with me to my first ultrasound and I'll show you. They'll measure every follicle and they have to be a certain number of millimeters to be considered mature and ready for egg collection. If I'm not wrong, they should be at least 19 to 20. Don't quote me on that. I'll find out again when I go in. And then there'll be other ones that are obviously maturing later because they were formed later. So by the time of egg collection, I had total 12 follicles, but only 6, half of those, were mature enough and reached the size that they were supposed to reach for them to be collected. Those other 6s just were, they explain it as like, they're just too slow. They're little eggs that just took their time and they were like, nah, I'm not ready to go. So they were left behind. And then out of those 6 that were collected, when they collect the eggs from you, they'll do all these genetic testing and make sure that it's a good quality egg. Out of the 6 that were collected, only 4 were of good quality. Which obviously, I mean, it's a good ratio, I suppose, but it's more than half. But yeah, so it's crazy if you think about it, you know, from 12 eggs, only 6 were collected. Out of those 6, only 4 were frozen. There's people who literally collect at the time of egg retrieval, or during the process, they see they have 20 eggs, 25 eggs, but only 2 were good to be frozen. So obviously it really is a very, very personal process, depends on every woman. What I went through, I'm not a doctor, by the way, so I'm just here to share my experience. And so what works for me might not work for you. Yeah, so essentially that is the confusing part of it all. I think it also affects a lot the mental health aspect of it, because you get all excited about how your ovaries are developing, and every time you go in, you're like, yay, okay, 12, and then they're like, no, but only 6 are the size that they need to be and stuff. So it's a roller coaster of emotions, but essentially that is the gist of it. Also, I just want to preface that I know the video yesterday was very long. This one is probably going to be long. I'm trying to keep it short, but because there's a lot of information that I want to give you before I actually start the process itself, which will all make sense to you once you hear what I have to say today. So bear with me. I know it's long and I apologize, but it's important. Okay, so this is, as I showed you, the first injections that I'm gonna have to do. they come in here and they always give you like an insane amount of needles. Trigger warning. I mean, I'm not going to take them out because no, but all of these are disposable needles. So they'll always give you essentially like this pen here is 2 doses, because this whole pen carries, as you can see here, 900 and my dose is 450. So 2 doses, but I have more than 10 needles in here. So in case you're like me and you, like last year, I would literally mess up and have to get another one and disinfect and like the whole thing. Don't be afraid, they understand. They give you tons of them. You'll actually be left over with a million. They also give you this box where you dispose of all of the used needles, and then you're due to return it to the hospital when your egg collection surgery is scheduled. And so you just basically give it to them and then they get rid of it. This looks very different than it actually looks quite cool, but this one looks very different than the injections I did last year. The one that I did last year looked way more like a syringe, which I'm sure these will look like, and I had to mix it, and there was supposed to be no bubbles. Like, it was a lot. It was very intense. This one's so much easier. Yesterday, the nurse showed me how to do it. You even have like a reading window where you're able to, by turning it around, I'll show you when I actually do the injections, you set your dose. So mine would be for 50 and set the dose for 50, and then, then the liquid is in there. Don't know if you can see it. Yeah. And then you obviously connect it with the needle and you inject it. What's cool about this one, that actually the nurse said to me, is that last year I felt very constrained to my life. In the sense that because I had to mix the medicine and it had to be refrigerated and all of this, I felt like I needed to be home all the time, every day. You have to do your injections 7 p.m. or later, but every single day at the same time. And I'm very intense about that. Like, literally not a minute later, not a minute less. So 7 p.m. Well, they tell you actually, I think you shouldn't go over 30 minutes difference between every day. But I was so, I really didn't want to mess up, so I did it every single day at the same time. So I would stay home and not really socialize, which made it very hard for me. Whereas this time around, I think this actually is one of the most common medications as well. This one has to be kept at room temperature, and I can put it in my purse because it's like a pen, not really like a syringe. And yeah, so this time around, I'm going in as I'm gonna live my normal life, and it just so happens that I have to inject myself at 7 p.m. every night, and that's it. I genuinely think that will help the process if you just say to yourself, I'm just living my normal days, I'm working the same, going to the office, I'm just have to do these injections. And that, one, I think will make it go faster, and 2, relieve the stress, and also company's good, keeps your body moving. I think it's important to do that. So that's something I recommend. So they will give you something that looks like this. And I'll go into detail. Let me just turn this camera around. So this summarizes basically everything I said. 1, it tells you to book your nurse consultation 1 to 4 weeks before the start of the treatment. These are the blood tests that I was talking about. Mine was in 2 different consultations. One was obviously for the blood test, and then I actually yesterday had my injection teaching. You have to fill a bunch of consent forms, and then obviously they give you your prescription and you pick up the medication, which I just showed you. Then you actually have to call the nurses from your clinic to tell them that you got your period, and that's when they'll book the scan. Then, so again, 450 daily is what I'm on, gonal F. These are all the different kinds of medications that are out there that you can potentially be prescribed. As I mentioned, I was last year on Menopur. This year, I'm on gonal F. Starting that day 2. Then you'll have your ultrasound between day 2 and 4. So I'm due to call them on Monday, considering that I get my period this weekend, to book that ultrasound. You are also going to be getting blood tests in each visit. That's going to measure your hormones, just going to make sure everything's looking good. Around the whole, like as you can see here, the whole process takes 10 to 16 days. Last year, mine took 12. So on day 12, I already had my surgery. It might be that it's before, if your ovaries are reacting really quickly. It might be that it's later if your ovaries are reacting slowly. Then, excuse me, then you start taking the antagonist, which is this medication that I told you about that prevents your body from releasing the eggs. And then you obviously keep taking these two together. Then you'll have follow-up ultrasound scans, then your trigger shot, which prepares your body. So this one says it's 33 to 39 hours before egg collection. This one will be very, very important and timed. And then your surgery. And then they say you should get your period 10 to 14 days later. Due to COVID, you have to take lateral flow tests, also very important. If you get COVID in the middle of this whole process will be canceled. So I recommend not being naughty and staying home. Well, not staying home, but just be safe or wear a mask. They will also give you this sheet. It tells you that you should inject them in your abdomen or thigh, as I mentioned, 7 p.m. or later. The thigh freaks me out. I really prefer the abdomen, but it's a personal thing. So if you prefer to inject yourself in the thigh, just think it's very like rock and roll. I don't know. I see people in movies doing that, but no. Then you have your little sheet that this is just for you to, if you have, ADHD like me and don't know what day it is of the week, you can check when you've done each injection. So obviously check here when it's done, and then you keep track of everything. You take this every time to your ultrasound that you have to do, these here, and they sort of sign it next to it and make sure everything's going to plan. So these two are very important just to keep always with you and remember everything that is planned for you. Okay, and then Q&A questions that I received yesterday that I think are important to share. So, there's no more sun. Can you work out while you're doing this process? And the unfortunate answer is, well, it's yes and no. So me, for example, in my normal life, when I'm not doing this, I love intense workouts. So a lot of running, a lot of HIIT, like really, really intense. And you're not allowed to do these kind of exercises while you're going the egg freezing process, because your ovaries are very sensitive. You need to protect them at all costs, basically. But you are allowed to do slow movements like yoga, a bit of Pilates, but Pilates that is not heavily focused in your abdomen, like abs. Like, don't go start doing like intense ab workouts. But like legs, whatever, that's fine. Last year I didn't work out at all because I was so stressed and terrified that it was going to affect it that I didn't. And I think that was a big mistake. This year I'm literally going to do a form of yoga or meditation, or even going on long walks. Walking might be, if anything, the best, but you're not allowed to do any intense workouts. So don't recommend that. Just recommend, slow movements, basically low intensity workouts. And then someone asked me as well, how long does it take for you to recover post-surgery? So again, I guess that is also a very personal thing. I'll make another video because I actually suffered from mainly the worst part of this whole egg freezing process for me was post egg collection. It like messed up something in my system and it was very intense, but it's very rare. And even my fertility doctor's like, I've never heard of this. But of course, it's me and I always get the weird shit, so. But usually they say it's around 10 days for your body to flush out all of the hormones that you put in your body, which makes sense. So they say to you, drink a lot of water. Even while you're doing this process, like literally I chugged so much water, and I think it also helped me to not put on weight because it helps flush out like the hormones. So drink at least, I don't know, double the amount of water you usually drink every single day you're going through this, and especially post-surgery. So they asked me how long it takes to recuperate from the surgery and when people are able to work out again. So I was able to work out, I would say, really, really work out, like go on a proper run or do a HIIT workout, 14 days, if I remember. I felt really, really bloated, and one, because of all of this, but two, anesthesia and I don't get along, and just so bloated, so painful, like a lot of trapped air was in my stomach. So I assume they fill your stomach with air, as they always do with anesthesia. Just was like not fun. So it was really painful, and I just had low energy. You also get cramping, not really bad cramping though. My cramping when I'm on my period is 10 times worse. So it's tolerable. Even with just some Advil, you'll be fine. So I reckon that you'll be back in your normal life 10 to 14 days post-surgery. So genuinely, it's so worth it. The whole process in and of itself, from start to when you start feeling absolutely back to your normal self, is a month, if a month, maybe less. And you know, it's so worth it for me. All of these, you know, all the pain, all the mental health, all of it is so worth it in the end. So yeah, it's pretty much it. And then what other questions I had? Oh, they asked me why I'm not drinking, because basically my doctor didn't say like you shouldn't be drinking before the process, but I chose to do so because I listened to this podcast. I don't know if you know of Huberman. He is the best. I love these kind of science-based podcasts, and listened to the male and female fertility podcast. I will put it in the comments below if you're interested in it. It's incredible. And it says alcohol is one of the most detrimental things you can do to your fertility. Does it mean that I'm going to start drinking? No. Definitely not going to stop drinking, but do I think I want to have my body in the most optimal state before I do this process? Yeah. So I quit drinking 6 weeks ago, and obviously not going to be drinking during the entire process, even though the nurses say, yeah, a glass of wine won't harm you and stuff. Sure, if you choose to do that, nothing's probably going to happen. I don't want to put anything in my body. So that is specifically why I'm doing it. This girl who messaged me, she said she was going to stop drinking as well after she heard that I was doing it too. But I mean, it's really a personal thing. You know, as I mentioned a year ago, I was drinking heavily before the process and it didn't go great. This is just me connecting the two. It may be that it has nothing to do with each other. Who knows? But I just really want to give my body, treat my body as a temple while it houses my future frozen babies, I guess. So yeah, basically that is essentially what this all entails. My next video will be when I start injecting myself with the hormones. So you'll be there for when I do my first injection, and we'll let you know how I'm feeling, all of it. And then I also, just to let you know, we'll be doing an entire episode about the finances of this, different ways you can cut the costs. There's companies out there that are very helpful. So yeah, essentially I'm gonna give you a sort of a holistic approach to all of this. So finances, how much it is, give or take, because I know I'm in a privileged position to be able to afford it. I know that it's a very expensive process, but like I mentioned, there are companies out there that work to lower these costs. There's also companies that offer free egg freezing to their employees, countries that also offer a lot of aid to women who are looking to do this. And so that will be a whole episode in and of itself. Again, yesterday I was very, like, my heart was so warm with all of the messages I received from women, questions, everything. So if you do want to ask me a question and you want it to be anonymous, not put it on this YouTube channel, I totally understand. This is a safe space. So you can DM me in my Instagram. It's at anakleinv, and I will answer any questions you have and take you on this journey with me. So see you next episode when the injections start.